You're standing in the meat aisle, and one package of ground beef is the brightest red in the whole case. That red is the reason your hand reaches for it. And that red is the first thing I need you to stop trusting tonight. I spent months checking 10 different ground beef brands with my own two hands, and I found only 4 I would actually put on my family's plates. The other 6 weren't rotten. They were dressed up to look fresher and cleaner than they really were, using quiet tricks most shoppers have never once heard about. None of this is new knowledge. It is old butcher counter wisdom that got buried the moment meat stopped coming from a person you knew and started arriving as a sealed tray under a cold white light. And by the end, I am going to hand you a test written down as far back as 1896 in a cookbook that once sat in nearly every American kitchen that reveals the truth about almost any beef in about 20 minutes using nothing but a plate you already own. I still remember my grandmother in her small kitchen in 1980-something, pressing her thumb into a mound of beef the butcher had just ground, leaning down and smelling it before she ever paid a cent. I thought she was being fussy. It turns out she knew something I spent 30 years forgetting. So let me hand it back to you, the way it was handed down before the packaging got clever. Let me start with that red color, because it fooled me for most of my adult life. I used to believe that bright red meant fresh and brown meant old. That is what I was taught, without anyone ever actually teaching me. It just felt obvious. Red is alive, red is clean, red is good. Brown is the color of something turning, something you should have used yesterday. Here is what I learned when I finally looked into it. The red color in beef comes from a protein called myoglobin. When myoglobin meets oxygen, it turns a vivid cherry red. Butchers have a name for this. They call it the bloom. Fresh-cut beef exposed to air will bloom bright red within about 30 minutes, and it is beautiful, and it is completely natural. But here is the part nobody mentions at the counter. That bright red is temporary. After a day or two, even perfectly good beef starts to turn a brownish gray as the myoglobin changes form again. That brown does not mean the meat is spoiled. It simply means the meat has been breathing the way all meat does. So think about what that means for a store. A package that turns brown on day 2 looks old to you, even when it is perfectly safe. And a package that stays red for a week looks fresh to you, even when it is not. The color you trust is not telling you about safety at all. It is telling you about oxygen and time, and both of those can be managed. That was my first crack in the wall. If the color can be managed, then somebody, somewhere, figured out how to manage it. And once I understood that, I could not unsee it. Which brings me to the trays themselves, and to a decision made in the early 2000s that changed what the entire meat case looks like. There is a technology called modified atmosphere packaging. In plain words, the air inside certain sealed meat packages is not ordinary air. It is a blend of gases chosen on purpose. And in the United States, one of those gases approved for use with fresh meat is carbon monoxide in a small controlled amount. The Food and Drug Administration allowed carbon monoxide in this kind of meat packaging in a series of decisions around 2002 and 2004. Now, why would anyone put carbon monoxide near your dinner? Because carbon monoxide binds to that myoglobin protein and locks it into a bright, stable, cherry red color that does not fade the way natural red fades. It holds that just cut look for days, even weeks longer than the meat would hold it on its own. Let me be fair and clear, because I am not here to scare you with half a story. The amount used is tiny, and the agency that approved it decided it was safe to eat. I am not telling you that gas will hurt you. What I am telling you is far simpler and far more useful. That technology takes away the one honest signal your eyes ever had. When color is frozen in place, a package can look exactly as red on the day it should be thrown out as it did on the day it was packed. In 2007, this got the attention of Congress, Lawmakers introduced bills trying to force clear labeling on carbon monoxide-treated meat because consumer groups argued shoppers were being misled about freshness. Some of those efforts stalled. The practice continued, and most people walked right past it, myself included, for years. So I stopped judging by color, but that left me with a problem. If my eyes can be tricked, what is left to trust? That question sent me digging into what was actually inside some of these packages, and that is where my stomach genuinely turned. Let me tell you about something the industry calls lean, finely textured beef. For years, when the big trimmings came off the carcass, the little scraps of meat and fat left over were considered too low grade and too risky to sell as beef. They tended to carry more bacteria because they came from the outer surfaces that get handled and exposed. So a company called Beef Products Incorporated developed a process. They would warm those trimmings, spin them in a centrifuge to separate the lean meat from the fat, and then treat that lean paste with a puff of ammonium hydroxide gas to kill bacteria like E. coli and salmonella. The result was a pale, pasty product that got mixed into ordinary ground beef as a cheap filler. It was in school lunches, it was in supermarket packages, it was in fast food, and for years, almost nobody eating it had any idea, because it did not have to be listed separately on the label. It was just called beef. Then in March of 2012, a news report put a nickname on it that spread across the country in days: pink slime. Within weeks, major grocery chains and restaurant companies were racing to announce they had removed it. Beef Products Incorporated had to close 3 of its 4 plants and laid off hundreds of workers. The public reaction was that fast and that furious. And here's what I want you to sit with. That product had been going into family dinners for years before most people heard the name. The reason it worked as a business was that it was invisible. You cannot avoid what you do not know is there. Now, some of that product is still made and sold under a cleaner name, and courts and companies have fought about whether the original nickname was fair. I am not here to relitigate that. I am here to point out the pattern, because the pattern is the whole lesson. Again and again, the thing that decides what ends up in your beef is not what is safest for you. It is what is cheapest to produce and easiest to hide from you at the counter. That is when the skeptic in me finally turned into something sharper, because I realized this was never really about one gas or one filler. It was about a system that profits when you cannot tell the difference. And the less you know how to judge meat with your own senses, the more completely you have to trust whoever is selling it. That dependence did not happen by accident. It was built slowly over about 100 years. Go back to 1906. A writer named Upton Sinclair published a novel called The Jungle about the Chicago meatpacking district. He meant to write about the workers, but what shocked the nation was his description of the meat itself. Rotten meat patched up with chemicals, filth swept into the grinders, things no one wants to picture near their food. The public outrage was so enormous that the same year, 1906, Congress passed the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Those laws created the beginning of the federal meat inspection we still have today, and that was genuine progress. I am not knocking inspection. Inspection saves lives. But watch what happened to ordinary people over the next few generations. As the system got bigger and more official, families slowly stopped judging their own food. Why press and smell and inspect your own beef when a government stamp and a big brand name promised it was handled for you? The knowledge my grandmother used at that counter started to feel old-fashioned, even a little paranoid. Trust the stamp, trust the brand, trust the bright red tray. And in trusting all of that, we quietly handed away the one thing that had always protected regular people: our own ability to tell good from bad with the tools we were born with. Our eyes, when they still meant something, our nose, our hands. The skills got pushed aside not because they stopped working, but because someone else preferred we not use them. So let me start handing those skills back, because they still work exactly as well as they did 100 years ago. The first one is the smell test, and it is more precise than people think. Fresh ground beef should smell like almost nothing. A faint, clean, slightly iron or bloody note, and that is all. If you open a package and get a sour smell, a tangy smell, anything that reminds you of ammonia or something sweetish and off, that beef is breaking down, no matter what color it is. The nose catches spoilage that the eye cannot see, and it catches it early. But here is the trick most people miss. Cold blunts your sense of smell, and it blunts the smell coming off the meat too. So if you sniff a package straight out of a cold case, you may smell nothing even when there is something to catch. My grandmother knew this without knowing the science. She would let the beef sit for a couple of minutes and warm just slightly, then smell it. Warmth releases the volatile compounds that carry the odor of spoilage right up to your nose. The second skill is touch. Fresh ground beef should feel moist but not slimy. When you run a clean finger across it, you want a little wet, a little tacky, and no more. If your fingertip comes away with a slippery, ropey film, almost like a thin coat of slime, that is bacteria colonizing the surface. That slick feeling is one of the most reliable spoilage signs there is, and it shows up whether the meat is red or brown. Those two tests cost you nothing. They take about 10 seconds, and they were standard practice in millions of households within living memory. We did not lose them because they failed. We lost them because the packaging got sealed and the counters got replaced by shelves, and nobody ever handed the test down again. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. And I want to speak straight to you for a minute. Maybe you are sitting there thinking this all sounds fine for people with money, people who can drive to a fancy butcher and pay a premium and grind their own gourmet beef. Maybe you are on a fixed income. Maybe your only real option is the regular grocery store with the regular sealed trays, and you are wondering if any of this is actually for you. And if you want to go even deeper into that history and into the practical systems that help you push back against it every single day, I want to mention that I put the most useful of this research into a book called Smart Basics, part of a series that includes Deep Frugal and System Complete. These are not recipe books. They are the kind of reference you keep in the kitchen because they hand you the judgment that got taken away, written down so you never have to remember it from scratch. You can find a link in the description below. Now, back to how that dependence was built, because understanding the exact timeline is what makes the skills I am about to hand you feel not like tips, but like something you were always supposed to have. This part is for you specifically, because the best protections here do not cost a single extra dollar, and you already own every tool you need. Start with the package you can already reach in any store, turn it over and read the date, but read it the way almost nobody does. That date is usually a sell-by date, and here is the secret the label will never explain. A sell-by date is a message from the manufacturer to the store, not a safety promise to you. It tells the store how long to display it. The United States Department of Agriculture has said plainly that a sell-by date is not a safety date, and that ground beef is generally best used within 1 to 2 days of purchase regardless of what that date says. So do not let a comfortable future date lull you. 1 to 2 days is your real window once it is in your cart. Next, use the package as a tool before you ever open it. Tilt the tray. If you see a large pool of watery pink liquid sloshing around the bottom, that is a warning. Some liquid is normal, but a lot of purge, as the industry calls it, often means the meat has been sitting, freezing and thawing, or has been handled roughly. Fresher, better handled beef holds its moisture inside. Now use your thumb right through the plastic. Fresh ground beef has a springy, resilient feel. Press gently, and it should push back. If it feels mushy, packed down, and stays dented where you pressed, that texture change is telling you the proteins are breaking down. This is the exact same thumb press my grandmother used, just done through a sealed lid instead of over an open counter. The wisdom transfers perfectly. Only the packaging changed. And here is a free habit that protects you more than any brand ever will. Reach to the very back of the case. Stores rotate stock so the oldest packages sit up front where you grab them first and the freshest deliveries get loaded behind. It costs nothing to reach an extra foot deeper, and it can move your beef days younger in an instant. One more, and this one is my favorite, because it uses a tool sitting in your kitchen right now. Your freezer. If ground beef is on a good sale and it is fresh the day you buy it, take it home and freeze what you will not cook in the next day or two immediately while it is at its best. Do not let it linger in the refrigerator, writing out that generous sell-by date. Freezing it fresh locks in that quality. People used to do this without thinking. We turned it into a chore we skip. It is free, and it beats every fancy fix I could sell you. So now you can judge the package, judge the date, judge the smell, judge the feel. That already puts you ahead of almost every shopper in that aisle. But there is one deeper question I kept circling, and it is the question that finally explained why ground beef, out of all meats, is the one that keeps making people sick. Why is a hamburger riskier than a steak? Think about it. A whole steak and a package of ground beef can come from the very same animal cut by the same knife. Yet food safety experts will tell you a rare steak is generally low risk, while a rare or undercooked burger is the classic way people end up in a hospital with E. coli. Why the enormous difference? The answer is about where bacteria live, and it is one of the clearest pieces of food science I have ever come across. Harmful bacteria like E. coli live on the surface of meat, not inside the muscle. On a whole steak, the inside is essentially sterile, and any surface bacteria gets seared and killed the instant that outside hits a hot pan. That is why a steak can be pink in the middle and still be safe. The danger never made it inside. But grinding changes everything. When you grind beef, you take all those outer surfaces with whatever is living on them, and you mix them completely throughout the entire batch. What was only on the outside is now spread evenly through every bite. That is exactly why ground beef has to be cooked all the way through to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, while a steak does not. Grinding takes surface risk and drives it deep into the center where heat has the hardest time reaching quickly. That alone would be a manageable problem if a package of ground beef came from one animal, but it does not. And this is the fact that genuinely changed how I shop, the fact that turned my caution into resolve. In his book, Fast Food Nation, published in 2001, the journalist Eric Schlosser reported something about industrial ground beef that I have never been able to forget. A single fast food hamburger patty can contain meat from hundreds, even thousands of different cattle, blended together in one enormous batch at a processing plant. Sit with that number for a second. Thousands of animals in one patty. It means if even one of those animals carried a dangerous strain of bacteria, that contamination gets mixed and smeared across an entire production run into countless packages, shipped to countless stores in countless towns. It is exactly why modern beef recalls are so massive, sometimes tens of thousands of pounds pulled from shelves across many states at once. The blending that makes industrial beef cheap is the very thing that turns one sick animal into a nationwide outbreak. We saw the worst of it in 1993 when contaminated hamburgers from a fast food chain in the western United States sickened hundreds of people and killed 4 children. That tragedy is the reason for a lot of the cooking temperature rules we follow today. But the deeper cause, the blending of countless animals into one anonymous batch that never went away, it is simply how the cheap stuff is made. So this was the whole picture I was standing inside of. Color I could not trust, fillers I could not see, dates that were not safety promises, and a grinding and blending system that takes the meat of thousands of animals and mixes their risk into a single tray. When I looked at my 10 brands through that lens, The 4 I trusted were the ones that broke that chain in some honest way, and the 6 I put back were the ones that hid inside it. Which finally brings me to the test I promised you at the very start. The one from 1896. The one that cuts through every trick at once. Let me tell you where I found it. In 1896, a woman named Fanny Farmer published the Boston Cooking School Cookbook. It became one of the most influential kitchen books in American history, in millions of homes for generations. What made Fanny Farmer revolutionary was that she insisted on being exact. Before her, recipes said a handful of this and a pinch of that. She demanded level measurements and clear method, and in doing so, she wrote down the practical judgment that experienced cooks used every day, including how they told good meat from bad, back when a woman could not simply trust a sealed package because sealed packages did not yet exist. The old kitchen wisdom she and her generation preserved came down to a simple truth about how meat behaves in water and air, and you can run it this weekend with a plate, a bowl, and cold water you already have. Here is the test. Take your ground beef out of that sealed, gas-filled, color-locked package the moment you get home. Break it up loosely onto a clean plate and just let it sit in open air for 15 to 20 minutes at cool room temperature. Then look, smell, and touch, all 3. Watch what the color does. Honest, untreated fresh beef will do one of 2 natural things. If it was packed with little oxygen, the inside will be a darker purplish red, and as it hits the air, it will bloom brighter toward that fresh cherry red within about 20 minutes. That change is the meat breathing, and it is a sign of life and honesty. If instead the beef was already blooming red in the package and now in the open air, it does not move at all, does not deepen, does not shift, that frozen, unchanging red is your quiet signal that the color was locked in place rather than living. Real meat changes. Managed meat just sits there, perfect and still. Now the smell, warmed by those 20 minutes in the open, clean and nearly neutral, means good. Sour, tangy, sweetish, or sharp like ammonia means put it back or take it back, no matter how pretty it looked in the case. And now the touch, the same thumb my grandmother used, springy and tacky is good. Slippery, slimy, or mushy is spoilage that no packaging could hide once you set it free on an open plate. That is the whole test. Free the meat from the package, give it 20 minutes in open air, and let your own eyes, nose, and hands read what the tray was designed to keep from you. It works on any brand, at any store, on any budget, because it does not rely on trusting the label. It relies on trusting yourself, exactly the way people did before the label existed. And if you want to break the chain completely, do the one thing that undoes almost every problem we have talked about tonight. Buy a whole cut of beef. A chuck roast is perfect and often cheaper per pound than premium ground, and either grind it yourself with a simple attachment or ask the butcher to grind that single piece for you in front of you. When your ground beef comes from one whole muscle instead of a blended batch, the surface bacteria stay minimal. The meat of thousands of anonymous animals never touches your dinner, and you can see with your own eyes exactly what went into the grinder. That is not some new gourmet trend. That is simply how nearly everyone bought ground meat before the giant central plants took over. My grandmother watched hers get ground. So can you. Everything the packaging was built to take from you, that plate and that grinder hand right back. What you just recovered is not a shopping tip. It is the quiet confidence your grandparents had standing at a counter, the ability to look at your own food and actually know you are the kind of person who refuses to be kept in the dark about what feeds your family, who would rather learn a thing once than pay to be fooled by it forever. That instinct is not paranoia. It is the oldest form of self-respect there is. So let me ask you one specific thing, and I truly want you to answer this one. When you go home and free your next package of ground beef onto a plate for 20 minutes, does the color change and bloom, or does it sit there frozen and unmoving? Tell me what you see in the comments, and tell me where you are watching from, because I read these and I want to know which stores near which towns are selling the honest red and which are selling the locked-in kind. If tonight gave you back even one thing you did not have this morning, then you belong with the rest of us who are quietly reclaiming the practical knowledge that convenience talked us out of, one forgotten method at a time. Subscribe and stand with us, because the next thing I am investigating is the truth about grocery store eggs. And there is a way to tell how many weeks old an egg really is using nothing but a glass of water, and once you see it, you will never trust a carton date again. Before you go, one thing. Tonight I showed you why that red color lies. Inside the Old Ways Almanac, I pick up right where this video stopped and walk you through the whole plate test. In there, you can ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone. Thousands of Old Ways folks are already inside. Just point your phone at the code on your screen, cancel anytime, one click. If this helped you shop a little smarter, do subscribe and stay with me. I have more honest food checks right here on the channel, made to keep you and your family safe.